Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As each of us approach midlife, we try to discover how come all the choices we've made have led us to the point where perhaps we feel a bit frustrated, scared, or perhaps fearful about what the unknown that lies before us is. After all, unlike children, we realize that maybe our mortality is just around the corner and we'd like to do something a little bit different. Maybe a step in the next direction which will help us achieve a dream or a goal that has long eluded us. But as we step in those directions and feel that we're taking the right steps and the opportunities that present themselves can move us to where we want to be, we find ourselves stumbling up. And because we've had a long period of time to reflect on what our lives were that got us to the point we are now, we have to ask ourselves, is there a pattern emerging that's helping us not maybe get to where we want to be? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is someone who's presented a book that certainly will come up with a lot of questions as the reader goes through it, and perhaps provide a solution that we can begin to uncover those deep unveiled truths that lie beneath the surface of our own human psyche. The book is Secrets and Lies. It's surviving the truth that changes our lives. And our guest joining us today is the author of previous books, Walking on Eggshells, which was about parents and their adult children, and Mom Still Likes You Best, which is about adult siblings. She's been an editor for more than 40 years. She also discovered Mary Piper's Reviving Ophelia, commissioned Patricia O'Connor's best-selling Woe Was I, and Rachel Simmons' Odd Girl Out. So, taking a look at those titles, she's very familiar with this kind of work, and I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Jane Asay. Jane, how are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on your show.
You bet. Thank you for joining us, and I'm surprised you're well, providing what I've read between the cover of this book. This is some pretty difficult stuff to chew, but what I found fascinating was a lot of my own kind of stuff in there thinking, there are a lot of layers to what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I think that, my book is about what it does to us to keep secrets, and then what it does to our sense of reality to discover secrets that people who are dear to us have kept. And it's true there are many levels, but, we're human beings. We're very complicated. And that is both kind of depressing at times, but it's also very hopeful.
Now, you kind of wonder what it would be like in a utopian world, and for some reason the image of one of the Star Trek movies, of course the one starring the original cast, is there was one where this guy was a Vulcan who was able to relieve you of your pain and suffering, to see the truth as it was.
Yeah.
And Kirk adamantly says, look, I'm not letting you do this. I need my pain. And sometimes it actually serves us well.
Yes, I think that's true, but I think first of all, we have the ability to suffer and to recover. Mm-hmm. Life is not, you don't know what's going to be dealt you. All you have is yourself. You have what you were born with, much of which you can't take credit for. If you're smart or you're artistic or you're articulate, I believe that what makes sense to say is, I'm lucky. I was given these things. Now, how am I going to use them? To what purpose am I going to put the gifts that I've been given? And so that's one side of it. We all have amazing capacities, many of which we never fulfill. The other side of it is that we have the capacity to do things that we wish we hadn't done. We have the capacity to err. I believe that the 10 Commandments are the selection of the 10 most done things. They say thou shalt not kill because there's a lot of killing, as we know. And, people covet their neighbors' wives. And this is who we are. We're human beings, both full of energy for good and full of energy for satisfying our needs. And not all of them are so great for the culture. Mm-hmm. So that's who we are. And we are capable of betraying the people we love. We are capable of loving the people we betray.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of this, too, I was just kind of curious how you got started in being interested in writing about something like this.
Well, you may know that if you've read the first and last chapter, of my book that I was both a secret finder and a secret keeper. And so it was my own experience of having discovered when my husband and I were married for 15 years and our kids were 8 and 12, sons were 8 and 12, when he confessed to me that he was homosexual, I was a finder of a very big and scary secret. And that night that he told me, I felt as if I were driving in a car and a baseball bat had hit the windshield. Everything cracked. My future cracked. My past was now understandable in ways, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was the finder. And then my husband and I, as you know, decided that night that we would stay married for many reasons that I don't know whether they were good reasons, but they were our reasons. And so then I was a secret keeper for 10 years, keeping the secret from my children and from the world. So I know what it feels like on both sides. And I thought that experience of my own would guide me to find people, to listen to their stories, and to try to make a map of the terrain of shame, of secret keeping, of revelation, and of resolution. And that's what my book hopes to do.
Now, I'm remembering in the movie Prince of Tides that that's how it ends, that it basically gets to the point that when the truth is revealed, it heals, it sets us free. But getting to that point isn't as easy at times.
No, it isn't.
Not that it even is mentioned or thought that it's easy, but discuss that a little bit.
Well, you know, when you have a secret, when you've done something or you are something that you're ashamed of and you don't want the people you love or the person you love to know about it, you keep the secret. And most people say, well, I'll tell next week. Well, next week comes and then they say, well, I'll tell the week after. And decades can go on. And the longer you keep that secret and you veil it, you cover it in lies, the harder it is to tell. Because you're ashamed not only of what you've done, but of the fact that you've deceived people. And this is a book about secrets kept between people who love each other, not John Edwards lying about his mistress. That's not of interest. The politicians are not of interest. What's of interest to me is what happens between people in their homes and who love each other, and how they deal with their shame, with the deception, and then finally come to tell the truth. Sometimes the truth, as you know, comes out. A woman receives an anonymous letter, and she's in her late 20s, and the letter says that she's adopted. Well, then her parents, who had adopted her and never told her, they were stuck with dealing with how to tell her what had happened. In other cases, people just feel they can no longer stand to keep the secret. You break, and the truth pours out. And, of course, all of theater, classical theater, leads up. It's a mystery. We don't know what's happening. Then the secret comes out. It's, Oedipus discovers that it's his mother he's been sleeping with. He puts out his eyes, and the curtain comes down. In my book, I say there's another act after the curtain comes down, after the secret is revealed. And that's the act that makes a difference. That's the scene. That's the process that makes a difference between disruption and recovery.
A fascinating aspect on what you're talking about was I was just recently reading a book on history, but it shows what really happened. And one of the most fascinating stories was that of Walt Disney. Walt Disney, from my understanding, was actually an orphaned child, even though he had a brother. Okay? And don't you notice that through the theme of most of his original works, it deals with that outcast child?
Sure.
The fact that they'll fall into this bliss and live happily ever after. But that's the funny thing even about American society, is that they have created this unreality about the way things are. We've got Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and the nuclear family, but why do we still buy into that? Is it the possibility that maybe that might happen, or what do you think that is?
Well, I think it's the foundation of our culture. I've been thinking a lot about that. It isn't in my book, Secrets and Lies, but I have been thinking about it. And that is, we are...
It causes people to think about it.
Well, yes, exactly, because and the question is, is it a God-given right to be happy?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a responsibility to be happy? Or are the people living next door really happier than I am? And I think it really comes from the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this is a country where you really, really, really think there's something wrong with you if you're not as happy as you think you should be. And in my experience, having spent 10 years traveling the country, listening to people, talking to people, writing books, it's a mirage. It's a Facebook reality. People put up on Facebook the pictures of their darling children and their wonderful meals, and you think, oh, my God, everybody else has such darling children who'll sit still for a picture, and they eat such wonderful meals. It's a facade.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the great truths that I have found, I haven't written about it yet in a book, but that I have found is that people are not always as happy as we think we should be. There are conflicts, there is pain, and it's not our fault if we're suffering. It's our strength that helps us deal with the suffering. That's why I think truth is so important. My mantra throughout this book and throughout my conversations is, if you can say to yourself, at least I know, and you can face a reality, you can stand up straight and say, now what do I do?
Now, Jane, it's really interesting. I was kind of curious how you came to collect these different stories that you did. Do these people willingly share these things with you, or how did you go about getting this?
Well, actually, it was harder to get people to tell me their secrets
I could believe that, especially some of the ones you read in the book.
Well, I interviewed 65 or 70 people. There, a small percentage of them are in the book, but I found people. I wrote a column on the op-ed page of the New York Times a few years ago, which was about staying married for the children. And a lot of people wrote and said, I have a story for you. And I also, I networked, and there were enough people who were kind enough and interested enough to share their intimate stories with me, with the expectation that I would treat them with respect, and I have, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no doubt about that, because what you see is that people, as painful as some of these were in discovering what the reality was and coming to that truth and hopefully forgiveness, is that they seem and felt not only that they trusted what you had to do, but also respected as well. Well,
I think so. And, you form a very close, you may only speak to somebody for an hour or an hour and a half, but when you're talking about fundamentals like this, there's a kind of closeness that happens. And because I'm a good listener, but also because I do not believe that judgment, this is wrong, this is right, this is sick, this is normal, has a role in what I was investigating or writing. People are more relaxed because they can sense immediately that I'm not judging them or the people who have betrayed them.
Mm-hmm. An interesting note on judgment. I remember one of the most valuable lessons I had about the idea that it's easy to blame outside circumstances for why you are where you are, or whatever the case may be. And this was from a 5th grade World War II veteran who was a teacher of mine.
Yes.
And he says, you just remember this one rule, and it took me a lot of years to get this, but when I finally did, I thought how wildly real what he had to say was, and that is this. Whenever you point your finger out to blame, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you. That makes you 3 times as responsible for what's happening than it is for what you think is causing the thing to happen.
Well, I think that's partially true, but there are times when people certainly a number of the people in my book had no blame for what had happened around them, for the secrets that were kept, for the suffering that they endured. So I'll take that 50%. But the rest of it is, what do you do? And this is part of what the book is about. How do you deal with a fact, a truth that you had no role in creating and that you might have denied, but you didn't make it happen? How do you deal with your feelings of betrayal and anger? And then, in the end, what do you do with the love that always was there for the person who betrayed you? Because you can't really have that kind of betrayal unless you've been that close.
I know that you say the one thing that really can help people to begin to heal, which is, I believe, the first thing that becomes broken. It seems that that's what you're saying here, is that it's intimacy.
Yeah.
Tell us
Well, I
about
think
that.
you see, intimacy is this place where this kind of betrayal happens. It's like, here's the room. This is the room where you're really close to somebody. And when you discover that that person has been lying to you for years, that really destroys trust, and it kind of turns intimacy inside out. So then the question is, what do you do next? And the person who has been keeping the secret and telling the lies is usually doesn't want to tell the story or the truth because they're afraid the person they love is going to be mad at them, and they're right. And they're afraid that they're going to lose the love, and they could, and they sometimes often do. But there is a moment where the person who's been keeping the secret and lying about the truth has the opportunity to tell why that secret was kept, what made them do what they were ashamed of, how they feel about it. And as they offer a context and a description of what was going on in their lives to the person who's been betrayed, the person who's been betrayed then has the opportunity to create a new narrative. Oh, this is why he did this. Oh, that is why she behaved this way. If I can understand you, then maybe I can deal with you. I think forgiveness is a tricky word for me, but healing is a better word for me.
What makes forgiveness tricky for you?
Well, because I think it's easy, and because I think forgiveness is something that you can think you can do. I think it's deceptive. I think, somebody has hurt you and you can say to yourself, I'm going to forgive that person. And you still wake up in the morning ready to kill them.
Isn't that the truth?
Well, yeah. So I think forgiveness is something that creeps up on you like moss. I think the first thing you feel is anger and outrage and hurt and all of those things, all of which are energetic, and they cauterize the pain. They deal with it. And you tell your friends, he was sleeping with my best friend, and your friends say, oh, what a rat. And you go on like that for a while. But then the question is, well, what's wrong with me? What did I really love? Did I really love him? Was he really the person? And then you begin to try and rethink and recreate that story. And if you have a lot of information, it makes it easier to understand what was really going on. The minute you have a sense of understanding that's based on reality, then you make a choice. In my life or out.
Exactly. That's pretty much about the only thing you can do. I'm kind of curious, when you were putting this together, as you were talking with these people, and of course the main word, secrets, what have you come to understand from this experience as to why we keep secrets?
Shame.
Is it shame?
Shame.
Okay.
It's shame. And it's pain. It's the absence of pain. People, it's not only, in the most of the cases, most of the stories I've written about in my book, it starts with shame. In some stories, in the chapter where I talk about a secret that is in the family and you can't talk about it, which is a chapter called If You See Something, Say Something.
Post 9/11, yes.
Well, yeah. There, in families, for instance, I've met a number of families where a child died, and the parents said, we'll never discuss that child again. We won't discuss Lori anymore. And what that does to a family, to the other children and to the family, is just to stop the closeness. Because if you can't talk about the most important, the most powerful and heartbreaking and important thing in your life, then you're going to make small talk. And so that is... But those secrets are kept not out of shame; they're kept out of a desire to stop the pain. Because for some people, talking about a painful thing is harder than keeping silent. Although I think it's dangerous because that silence can really freeze relationships.
It makes you kind of wonder, too, with all of this, what it would be like, and if it's even possible, that we can actually come to being in truth without the feeling of cynicism or sarcasm in a world like today?
We just have to, I agree with you completely. Today's world is just so laced with acid. That's why the family is so important. That's why what happens when the front door is closed is so critical, because it is within the family that we are allowed to be the good people that we would like to be. Mm-hmm. We're encouraged to do that. You go out on the Internet, you want to talk about the latest scandal and all, everybody gets cynical, because that's our language of public life. And it's really hard to take, because most people in their heart of hearts are not cynical. They're emotional. They're sensitive. They're worried. They're scared. They're angry. They're loving. They're happy. They're sad. This is who we are. We have a range of colors of our emotions. We're born with them. Mm-hmm. And to shut them off for gossip or cynicism is really not to do honor to our being.
You take a look at these television shows that have been around for quite a while in the daytime, where you have the host bringing somebody on with a problem.
Yeah.
And I always found it funny how self-righteous the audience is. And I think, now, I'm sure this is all staged, and who knows, maybe this is even
all
an
reality
actor.
TV, sure.
But the fact is there's a reality to what's happening there. It's, here's somebody bearing their pain or having the courage to do so. Mm-hmm. We all have this self-righteous act to stand there in judgment. And it's like, wait a minute, what are you guys all hiding?
Well, I love that point. And, that's Judge Judy. All those judge shows, you get it.
I was talking more like what do they call them, Ricky Lakes and things like that.
Yes, I agree with that. But even the ones that seem a little more refined.
Right.
Are,
like they're trying to really seek the truth, but...
Yeah, but it makes, I think it makes people feel better to see other people judged. And I have this theory. This is crazy. Sometimes I have a theory. I have to preface it by saying it's crazy. But over the course of the 10 years that I've been writing these books, I have found that being judgmental is the worst thing, because grown parents are judgmental of their grown children. They don't want to accept who they are. Brothers and sisters are judgmental of each other. People in all walks of life judge themselves too. Many people are harder on themselves than the world would make them. I have this theory that if the scientists could invent a pill that took away that harsh judgment, we'd have a much happier world.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think that's the ultimate sin that needs to be corrected.
Well, it's very hard to do, because we all have memories and experiences growing up where we've been made to feel that we haven't hit the mark, and so we judge ourselves, and then we judge other people. And when I was lecturing to or speaking to parents of grown children, I would say, we all make mistakes. They're making mistakes too, but you can't control it, and it's not your fault. You didn't want to listen to your parents' advice, and they don't want your advice, and you know very well we learn from our mistakes. Mm-hmm. So stop judging yourself as a parent, and maybe it'll be easier for you not to judge your children.
Mm-hmm. And looking at our shadow selves, if that's fair to say, because in many cases that's kind of what happens when you have a secret or a lie and you bury it. There's a shadow that's sitting in there, and it's lurking, and that's energy, and all energy needs to go somewhere. Uh-huh. And it's becoming more and more scientifically self-evident that, for instance, a lot of the diseases, cancer being one of the biggest ones, are an expression of something that just hasn't found a way to release itself. And interestingly enough, about 15 years ago, I had a wonderful segment that I had done with an author of a book where she had talked about 4 different stages of cancer, 4 different women with 4 different religious beliefs. And what was interesting is she was calling herself, along with the other 3 women who agreed, that they were cancer initiates. In other words, this was something like a rite of passage, if you will. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't believe it. Sorry. I think there are lots of roots of cancer, and I think to blame our emotions or ourselves for it is not helpful. I think and I think there was a long time where the medicine was saying, well, if you have a good attitude towards your cancer, you'll have a better percentage of surviving. Well, that is scientifically untrue, and also it made the people who were upset feel that they were killing themselves when they were just upset. And I think that I think we all bear a lot of pain, and we have such wonderful ways to deceive ourselves and not to see what we see, and to try not to feel what we feel, all of which create who we are and create our ability to get out of bed in the morning and cross the street. I live in Manhattan. I got to tell you, crossing my corner takes a lot of courage.
I think getting up in Manhattan takes a lot of courage.
but we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we pass through many stages. I don't think there's one path. I think the real question is, how can we walk through the hard times and the good times with a kind of understanding that the hard times will change to good times and the good times aren't going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. I think that's the perspective that I have, and it's gotten me through some hard times.
Mm-hmm. I know that you say in your book, when it comes to revealing the truth or letting go of the secret, getting it out there in the open, that it makes us stronger. And that's something that I very much agree with, because how is keeping something like this making you any stronger?
Well, it isn't, and it's sapping your energy. If you have to, it keeps you from being close to people. If you're keeping a secret, and I can tell you this from experience, you have to change the subject when it gets too close to your secret. And if you're schmoozing with a friend or you're taking a walk, you're alert. You're not relaxed. That takes energy. And keeping a secret is, a really hard secret, is extremely sapping. One of the things that was really an example of that is when my husband and I kept the secret of his homosexuality for almost a decade after he came out to me, and then we decided to get a divorce, and he came out completely. But he was really upset at the thought of losing this family, even if it was not a regular family. He had by this time found the love of his life, and he wanted to be with him, but he was nervous. So he went to the doctor for a physical, and the doctor said, "What happened?" And Dick said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Your blood pressure is down, and your pulse is amazing. It's so slow." Mm-hmm. And the pressure of this secret had taken a toll on his physiology.
You know, one of the hardest things to think about that you talk about here in Secrets and Lies is the point where somebody either on their deathbed or when somebody passes and a secret is revealed, because the person who is left behind is the one that really has to bear the cross. How does somebody deal with something like that?
Well, it's about the hardest thing, because at least as far as I can tell, and I spent quite a long time researching and thinking about writing this book, a deathbed revelation lacks all the capacities for resolution because you can't talk to the person. And I think what was going on, what were you thinking? Sometimes people leave diaries. As you know, in the book there's a woman whose mother
leaves an extensive diary, exactly.
Yes,
I remember that.
And she discovers who her mother was reading her diary. And so it's late, but she found her mother, and she found what she could appreciate and love and have sympathy. One of her mother's secrets was that she had been sexually abused as a child by her father. Mm-hmm. So my friend, the woman whom I interviewed, went to her uncle, her mother's brother, and said, "I know." And her uncle wept, and he said, we would be at the dinner table. They were twins. And my father would ask me, do all the quizzing. What about current events, this. And then he would take your mother and put her on his lap. and love her. And he said, and I wondered why he didn't love me. And my friend thought, you're better off not having been loved by this man, because she had been abused and she never told. Her brother knew, and now her daughter knew. And it's tragic, but at least the daughter was able to get an understanding of the dynamics of her mother's personality. And a friend of mine was reading this chapter, and she started to cry. And I said, why are you crying? And she said, my mother was also abused, and now I see her. You've described this woman so clearly. Now I understand my mother in a way that I never did.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest thing that our listeners out there can take away from Secrets and Lies is in between the pages. I think through all of the stories, we really find a little bit of ourselves in each one of them. Maybe not to the extremes as some of these stories are, but and also we have talked here on the program quite a bit about cellular memory. And your body remembers everything.
Oh, yes.
You know, and the mind, anything you've ever taken in, you may not be able to recall it, but it remembers everything.
Yes.
And you know, and I could see as I was going through this in the different stories, and again, as I said, your circumstances wouldn't be maybe extreme, but you're going to take a little piece of yourself out of each one. There's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense of unworthiness. I'm not good enough, and it goes on, and you realize that sometimes as you talk about that, you begin to see that there are layers to this. It isn't just all one thing. You discover there it is and you're done, but it goes into the layers because that's how far you can push that memory down, but the cells never forget.
That's true, and the muscles too.
Exactly. And what's fascinating about that is I was leading off in the beginning of the program, you find yourself thinking, why can't I get to where I want to go? Why can't I have what I desire the way I think other people do? You know, you've got this sense of longing and yearning, but you don't know about this auto program you have inside of you that's been protecting you until you realize what it is.
Yes, I agree. And I also think the big shock in your sentence is the way other people are. I think people are not telling. It's not the same kind of secret, but people are not going to reveal to other people how frustrated they are or how their lives aren't as good as they might be. We have a sense of pride, and we're ashamed of the places where we haven't met the expectations of society. So and I have found again and again and again that people believe their neighbors have an easier life, a better family, except for the people who are screaming at each other, and you can hear it across the fence.
And there's an easy place to be. God, I'm glad I don't have it that bad.
Right, but also in careers, you know, people say, well, she's had it easy. Oh, she's so lucky. Look, she's done everything. And the answer is, the likelihood is it wasn't as easy as it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
And the path where you get at the end of a career, of a good career, is not where you started, and you've had your ups and downs just like everybody else. And what I'm trying to get across using secrets as a way of understanding how we behave is that we are all poor mortals. We are sinners and we are lovers. Mm-hmm. And if we can accept the fact of our fallibility and of our ability to understand and to love and to grow, then maybe we won't be in such pain about what we haven't got that we think we ought to have.
Mm-hmm. You know, a great example of that, Jane, was last night Jay Leno signs off from The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And he states, and of course he's at the end and he says this is the hardest part, but he also tells the audience, and I don't know how many of us, I know I didn't know this, but his first 3 years of doing The Tonight Show, each and every one of his family members had died.
Oh.
Now imagine being an entertainer to his level and taking on something that's like the super dream job, and the first year your mom dies, the second year your dad dies, and the third year your brother and your sister die.
Oh, my God.
You know, and having to entertain people to that level, and nobody might even know that something like that has occurred.
Yeah, well, it's a tribute to his showmanship and to his ability to entertain. You know, I often think that the funny people, I didn't make this up, But, it is said that the funny people are laughing on the outside, and a lot of the humor comes from pain. You only have to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. You only have to look at Woody Allen. Okay.
No, that's true. I've done comedy and seen plenty of the great comedians, and you can hear and see the pain coming through if you understand comedy well enough.
Exactly. And this is a perfect example of the two sides of every human being. You have pain and you can laugh. At the same moment, you can be shamed and you can be loving. At the same moment, we're much more complicated. I'm not telling you this. I'm not preaching to you because you agree. We are so much deeper and so much more complicated than we give ourselves credit for.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, and again, I certainly praise you for putting a book like this together, because even though there are a lot of what seems to be those are their stories, I've seen myself in all of them.
You did?
I could feel that. There was the sense, geez, I forgot about that, or and it wasn't like my childhood was bad, believe me.
No.
It wasn't anything like that. But you can see the elements, for instance, of disappointment or not measuring up, or just these different things, and you realize, man, I'm surprised my family even survived at all. But then you take a look at this and realize, geez, I'm really surprised they ever survived at all. But that they come to that place, that maybe real or true, honest forgiveness occurs once the secret or the lie is revealed. Like, that's okay. Let's just go to the next step now. That you actually become stronger and you have the capacity to really embrace and share true, honest compassion.
I think compassion is a word I prefer to forgiveness. Forgive me for getting back to that, but
it's okay,
because I think forgiveness implies a kind of moral judgment, and it's true. When somebody betrays you, it is a moral wrong. But over time, understanding the context and having compassion for the person feels more, internal than forgiveness, which I think of as a kind of an act of judgment undone.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you're right. I think that people, I think that when we do things that we're not proud of, and we decide that we can't bear to let the people we love know, then we enter a world where we are messing around with our own reality and with the reality around the people we love. So if and when we have to tell the secret, or it comes out, or we decide to tell the truth, a lot of the shades are gone, and you can see a little better. Of course, we never see everything completely because we're limited in our understanding, but you can come to a new reality. And as I say, you may still be really angry at what happened, but the other thing about knowing the truth from the point of view of the finder is that all of a sudden lots and lots of little details that didn't make any sense make sense. And
now I understand why she or he is the way they are and why they do these things in these circumstances.
Right. There's a woman I interviewed who didn't make it into the book, who always felt she was the ugly duckling in her family. Her two sisters she's tall and green-eyed and artistic, and her little sisters are short and dark-haired and mathematical. And she always thought, well, maybe my father isn't my real father. She begged her mother, she bothered her mother, she searched the documents, and when her mother was turning 70, and she was 50, this woman, she finally got it out of her mother. And this is a story that is not so unusual. This is before they had DNA and all. Her mother had been having an affair with two different men. Mm-hmm. She got pregnant. Now the question was, which one should she marry? Because she didn't know who the father was. Mm-hmm. So she chose the mathematician. It turned out many years later that she realized that this daughter was the daughter of the artist. Mm-hmm. And so when this woman discovered the truth about her father, she could understand why she was who she was. Mm-hmm. And it hurt her very much because her father didn't want to have anything to do with her. But at least she knew, and she knew who she was. and she understood the difference, and she didn't blame herself for not being mathematical, and she didn't curse herself for being an artist instead of a CPA, you know?
Mm-hmm. It seemed there was a story like that in the book, though.
Yeah, there was. But
okay.
Yes, there was.
For a minute, as you were describing, I was like, wait a minute, I just read that.
Right. No, but it's a similar story, but in the story that I've just told you, the skin fits better. And it's all certainly there are a lot of stories in my book about where people told me about how they discovered who their family really was, who their father was, what were the circumstances of their birth, and that is really it's really helpful to know where you come from, and not just genetically, but also in terms of personality and all things like that.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, I just came across something like that where there was a story where there was a girl who was adopted by someone who has done very well for herself, and as she approached her teen years, she became more and more difficult, began getting involved with drugs and alcohol, and the story reveals that perhaps the original mother was somebody who was abusive with those kinds of things and basically adopted her off. Well, just recently she discovers that her real father is out there, and they find out about her as well, and she had actually implored her mother, please tell me where my father is, and I'd like to connect. And the fascinating part about the secret was the fact that they had been told, the father was, by the original mother, that she was aborted. And it almost stands to reason on some cosmic God level, if you will, why perhaps this girl began to play out these self-destructive behaviors. Even though until recently, not knowing the whole story, that somehow you inherently, energetically, spiritually know this thing. How do you hide something like that? And in knowing that, maybe you're better off not trying to.
Well, there are a couple of people in my book who did discover the other side of their family. In one family, the parents divorced, and the mother said, the mother moved in with her parents, who said, we'll take care of you and the girls, but you can't see that rat anymore. And so the daughters were told that their father and his family moved away, they didn't like them, and that they were bad people, and they had no interest in the daughters. And at the time the father died, they reconnected with the father's family. And, of course, the mother had been lying to them. She'd been keeping a secret about who these people were. But then she found that her father's family had many traits that were just like her. Her mother's family was very prim. Her father's family was very raucous. They liked to party. They liked to dress up, just like the woman I talked to. And she said to me, my mother used to say, how come you are like that? Well, when she met her father's family, she said to herself, now I know why I'm like that. I'm just like my dad's side of the family.
And that's always encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It is, because and we worry. So we worry about what's the matter. A lot of people think that they're adopted because they don't get along with their family. Kids say, you can't be my real mother, or my birth mother, and it turns out they just are fighting at the moment. Sometimes people discover that there's a fact that's been kept from them, and now we're facing the whole issue of the artificial insemination and the secrecy about who the donors are. And let me tell you, in the next 10, 15 years, that is going to be a national issue, just like finding birth parents has been for the last 40 years.
I know it's such an interesting debate, too, as to whether or not somebody should be allowed to discover their natural birth parents. And to me, I think if they get to a point to ask that question, I don't see why that should be a problem.
I agree with you, and there are a lot of I think the public attitude toward that has changed. People like Betty Jean Lifton and others have been pioneers in helping people find their birth parents. It's painful. Here's another example. It's a perfect example of what I've been writing about in my book and what we've been talking about. It's painful when you find your birth parents because they they gave you up, and you don't know them, and you are scared, and you worry, and they worry, and it's very painful. And it may be disappointing, as in a couple of stories in my book, but you know. And then it's no longer a mystery. Children, make up, if there's something children don't understand, they make up their own explanations, and it's usually blaming themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's better to know, certainly in cases of parentage, there is no reason on the planet, I think, being a little absolute here, I think people have a right to know who their birth parents are.
I agree with you. There's no doubt that this is certainly also a hero's journey, if you decide to take this, and you can't see how this, it inevitably does make you stronger, especially when you come to vibrate into knowing who you truly are. It's kind of difficult to live, a life where you feel that somehow you're living a lie and you just don't understand why that is.
That's right, and there's one of the elements that I discovered in my book is that not knowing the ambiguity, could this be or that be? Is it true? Is it not true? That is the most painful experience. Mm-hmm. People want to know and move on. So there are a couple of stories in my book where the person was told a variety of truths, and they contradicted each other, and he or she lived never being sure what really happened. That is awful. That means that you can never heal because you can never come to a resolution of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Jane, what do you suppose was the most fulfilling thing for you personally as you put this book together?
That's a very good question. I think that what made me feel best was learning the lessons that the wonderful people who let me into their lives had to teach, and coming to a resolution myself about the secrets that had been kept on me and the secrets that I had kept. But also I got a sense of the universality of who we are. We're good and bad. We're shamed and we're proud. And feeling so much the vibration of the goodness as well as the pain in who we are and in the human condition has just been wonderful. And as I write in my book, my second husband was diagnosed with lymphoma, and there was no hope. He had a month. We didn't know how long he had to live, but it was not going to be months. And he was a fraidy cat going to the doctor, but he accepted this. He would say, "This is bizarre," but he knew he was dying. And so we were able to talk about everything with a degree of intimacy that had never, ever happened. It was a terrifying, and you believe me, I wept a lot, and so did he, but we were together in this truth that was so hard. And those hours and those days, they were honey. They were golden. They were like, I thought of it as honey that as a honeybee, I was storing in the hive for the rest of my life. And I kept saying to myself, this is the hardest thing. I'm losing the love of my life, but at least I know, and he knows, and we can be together and face this together. And it meant everything.
Mm-hmm. I think what also emerges, too, is the ideal that, it's really okay to open up and to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you completely. It takes so much courage to be who you really are, and to trust the people you love, to love you even though you're not everything you want to be. Leave perfect, We don't have to discuss perfect here, but you're not what you wish you were, and certainly not what they wish you were. To be able to be relaxed at home with the people you love, this is one of the great pinnacles of human existence. And it's very hard to be vulnerable, and it's very hard. It's like a seesaw. You be vulnerable, but then you have to be accepting. Mm-hmm. You can't be vulnerable and judgmental.
And we don't go to movies that stir us emotionally into tears because we're trying to find ways to avoid that.
Yeah, well, yes.
Just like the newest one, Saving Mr. Banks with Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Well, it's really true, and I think we are capable of such powerful emotion, and sometimes we have to go to the movies to let ourselves feel it because it's scary.
And we all cried when Old Yeller died.
Right. Right. And, there's nothing like a good tearjerker to make. Actually, after my husband died, I spent a lot of time. I loved tearjerker movies because then I could cry.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating subject here. How was, when you've been out there, of course, doing the book tour and talking and answering questions with the audience, has there been anything glaringly that has come out through people that you would like to share with our listeners?
That's a very good question. I think what I've learned from the interviews and the Q&As is that people suffer with the secrets they keep. And that isn't a lot of fun. Even though when it comes out, the people who discover the secret may say, "Oh, you're such a rat for having this must have been fun for you," whatever. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's really hard to keep a secret, and denying a truth that's all around you is also not fun. We have all these capacities to keep secrets and to deceive ourselves. None of it is fun, and it takes your energy. And it darkens your life. So, and that's what I really learned from the questions and from the conversations. And it's also not so terrible to be who you are,
Mm-hmm. Fascinating conversation, Jane. It's been a real pleasure to have you here on the program today, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to want to know more about this. Is there a website they can?
Sure. The website is my name, Jane, Jane. ISAY, one word, .com. That's my website. And I blog for Psychology Today and Huffington Post. You can find me all kinds of places.
Very good. Well, we found you here on the Beyond 50 radio program, and I think the world is a heck of a lot better because of it.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a joy.
Thank you so much, Jane, for joining us here on the program. The book, again, is Secrets and Lies. You can also find out more about that and visit us at Beyond50Radio.com. You can find out more. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you again for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Remember, live your day past halfway.